Okay, today we're going to go ahead and get into section 9.2 notes. All right, in 9.1 we looked at area of a triangle, so we looked at a regular triangle, and we looked at an equilateral triangle. Today, our focus will be on area of quadrilaterals. So let's go ahead and get started down below. Today we'll be looking at finding the area of quadrilaterals. Remember how many sides a quadrilateral has. Quadrilateral is a four-sided figure. All right, so we have a four-sided figure for our quadrilateral. Now let's name some of those shapes. All right, so remember, four-sided shape could be a parallelogram, we could have a rectangle, all right, let's switch colors for the middle. We could have a square, we could have a rhombus. Let's switch colors one more time. We could have a four-sided figure be a trapezoid. And the last one we could have is a kite. So these are our quadrilateral shapes. We're going to go ahead and go through the areas of each shape. So first, let's look at a parallelogram. A parallelogram's area is base times height. So area equals BH, base times height for this. Notice over to the picture, the base is the bottom, the height drops straight down from the two parallel sides that are non-diagonals. All right, so area of a parallelogram is base times height. Let's go to the next formula. Area of a rectangle is also base times height. All right, notice the picture to the right. We have our base, we have our height of our rectangle. Those are the two pieces of information we need to go ahead and plug in to solve. All right, our third shape is the area of a square. And the area of a square says side squared or side times side. So you can think of it either way. We can do s squared or we can take side times side. Remember, in a square, all four sides are the same. So if one side was 8, the other side's 8. All right, here we go. Let's keep going. Different area formulas. We'll be giving you the formulas. You'll have to know how to use them. We have area of a trapezoid. All right, so areas of a trapezoid is going to be base 1 plus base 2 times the height. Notice B1 and B2 is in parentheses, so we add those first and then multiply it times the height, and then that's all divided by 2. All right, and then our last shape, our last formula that we're going to look at is area of a rhombus or kite. They have the same formula. All right, you'll notice the formula over here says half times D1, D2. We're actually going to remember it in a different way. We're going to say area of a rhombus and a kite equals D1 times D2 all divided by 2. All right, the fractions are sometimes harder to work backwards with when we have to solve for missing pieces. So we like to write it as diagonal 1 times diagonal 2, all divided by 2. All right, so those are all the formulas for our quadrilaterals. We're going to apply the correct formula, the correct figure, and we're going to go through and solve some problems. All right, so let's go ahead and go to our first one. Just a quick note before we get started. Remember, don't forget that perimeter means to add up all sides. All right, so if it's a four-sided figure, we need to make sure we added up all four sides. The first one says find the area of the parallelogram. All right, so here we go. Area of a parallelogram, I'm going to identify my formula. My formula for a parallelogram is base times height, so I need to identify a base and a height. A base is my non-diagonal piece, so the 8 is my base. All right, my height is the drop down from the two non-diagonals, so my height is 6. So to find the area of this, I'm going to take base 8 times height 6, and I'm going to calculate that. That gives me 8 times 6 is 48, and remember it's area, so I'm going to label it centimeters squared. All right, so that 10 is just there in the picture to mess us up. If this question asks us for perimeter, don't forget opposite sides were equal, so I would put 10 here, I'd put 8 here, and I'd go back and add up the 4 that I circled in red if the question asked me for perimeter. All right, let's look at example 2. Example 2 says, find the base of a parallelogram in which the height is 12 and the area is 84. So you'll notice this time they gave us the area of the figure already, so we're going to have to work backwards. First, I'm going to identify my formula. My formula says B times H. And I know in this problem that I'm going to be plugging in 84 for A. I know that H is 12. It wants me to find what is B. So let's go ahead and plug things into the formula. A was 84. The height was 12. I don't know B, so I'm going to call it 12B. I have my equation set up. I'm going to go ahead and solve by dividing both sides by 12. It tells me the base should be 7 yards. All right, so working backwards, they gave us the area. We have to plug it in and use the formula and solve for the missing piece. All right, let's go to another example. Question says, find the area of a trapezoid. So before we get started, I'm just going to list the area of a trapezoid on the side so that I know what formula I'm using. I'm doing B1 plus B2 in parentheses times the height, all divided by 2. Well, you'll notice it tells me B1, it tells me B2, and it tells me the height in the question, so we're going to go ahead and plug it in. Area equals B1 is 8 plus B2 is 5, and that's times the height of 6.2, and that's all divided by 2. All right, I'm going to go ahead and calculate the top first and hit equals, and then divide it by 2. When I do that, I get 40.3 inches squared. All right, so we're plugging in the correct pieces into the correct formula for that. Now, let's look at an example of where we're probably going to have to work backwards and how we would approach that. Find B2. So this time it says find B2. Before it said find the area. If it says find the area, we're just plugging it into the formula. If it says to find the height or B2 or a base, we're going to work backwards. It tells us the area is 231. So again, I'm just going to list the formula we're using. I know I need to use B1 plus B2 times H, all divided by 2, because this is a trapezoid. Now I'm going to look at my picture and I'm going to identify a couple of things. I know in this question they gave me the area of 231. I notice in my picture B1 looks like it's 23 and the height is 11. It wants me to find B2. So I'm going to plug these pieces into that formula where they go and then solve it. So here we go. I have 231 in for A. For B1, I'm going to put 23 plus B2 times the height. The height was 11, and I'm going to divide that by 2. Now I'm going to go ahead and solve this. To solve this, the first step I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that fraction, that denominator. All right, I'm left with 462 is equal to 23 plus B2 times 11. And again, you could just call it B if you wanted. You don't have to call it B2. It's up to you. All right, now I'm technically multiplying both of those by 11 on this side. So instead of multiplying them, what I can do is I can go ahead and divide both sides by 11 to get that number out of there. You could have distributed and solved. You'll get to the same answer, but I'm going to divide by 11 to get it out. And I'm going to move to the side to write what it turns into. 42 then, when I divide it, is equal to 23 plus B2. Well, now to solve it, we just have to move our 23 over. So let's subtract 23 over, and I'm left with 19 is equal to B2. So our answer is 19 millimeters. All right, so working backwards, move that 2 in the denominator first, and then go back and solve. Here we go. In a rhombus, D2 is 12, D1, find the area. So let's go ahead and list our formula. Area of a rhombus says that I should be using D1 times D2 divided by 2. Well, they told us all the information we need in the picture. They told us that the diagonal 1 was 10, so I have 10 times 12 divided by 2. All right, so they gave us both pieces of info here. If you calculate that, it's going to tell us we get 60, and I'm going to label it inches squared because I'm finding the area. All right, let's keep going to another example. Example 6. Find D2 this time. So they're asking us to work backwards. It's a kite. All right, so I'm going to list my formula for a kite. Formula for a kite says diagonal 1 times diagonal 2, all divided by 2. Well, let's look at this question. They told us that D1 is 14. They told us that the capital A, the area, was 238. They want us to find D2. So let's plug it into our formula and then solve it. I know capital A was 238. I know diagonal 1 was 14. I don't know diagonal 2, so I'm going to call it a D. And I'm dividing all of that by 2. I'm going to go ahead and solve. I'm going to multiply by 2 first to get that denominator out of there. All right. If you do that, it will go ahead and give you 476 is equal to 14D. If you divide by 14 on both sides, you get D to equal 34. Now, you technically could have cleaned up that 14D and called it a 7D if you divided it by 2 and then just went back and divided by 7, but we'll stay in the habit of multiplying both sides by 2 to solve it. All right, let's get to some practice and go through some examples of each type of problem one more time to make sure we're all good. Find the area and perimeter of this figure. All right, well, it is a square because all 4 sides are equal, and I know a square is side squared. So to find the area, I can do 10 squared, which tells me that area equals 100 units squared. To find perimeter, each side would be 10, so I'm technically taking 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, or 4 times 10, so my perimeter would be 40 units. All right, letter B, let's find the area. All right, that's a picture of a parallelogram. Area of a parallelogram on our formula says B times H. So let's go ahead and identify B and H in this problem. The base is the non-diagonal. The height is the vertical part dropped down. Area then would be base times height. And 7 times 12 tells us the area is 84 inches squared. Remember, for this figure, if you had to find perimeter, opposite sides are equal, so I would put 9 here, 7 here, and I would go back and add up the 4 numbers that I circled in orange. All right, if you went back and added those up, your perimeter would be 32 for that problem if it asked you for perimeter. All right, let's go to letter C. First, we want to identify what type of shape it is so we can figure out the formula. That right there is a trapezoid. Formula of a trapezoid says B1 plus B2 in parentheses times height, all divided by 2. Well, let's go ahead and plug this in then. B1 and B2 can technically be interchangeable, but we know that their bases are 8 and 12, so I can use them in any order, so I'll do 8 plus 12. My height is the vertical part that goes up, so my height is 6, and that's all divided by 2. All right, if you calculate that, you should get 60, and we're going to call it feet squared because it's area of a trapezoid. All right, let's keep going. Let's go down to the bottom 2 right here. Find the area of a kite. All right, area of a kite. Let's list our formula. I know that it's D1 times D2 divided by 2. Well, you'll notice they tell us the area, or they tell us the diagonals, the diagonal 1 is 10, diagonal 2 is 15, and that's divided by 2. Well, that tells me that the area equals 75 units squared. All right, this time it wants us to find the area and perimeter. This is a rectangle, so our area formula should be B times H. So to find area, I have a base of 6 and a height of 4, so I'm going to take 6 times 4. That will give me an area of 24 centimeters squared. Now, to find perimeter, remember, opposite sides are equal, so if that was 4, that's 4, this is 6, that's 6, and now I'm going to add up all 4 sides. Well, if I take 6 plus 4, that's 10, plus 6 plus 4, that's 20. So my perimeter adds up to equal 20. Remember, we're adding all 4 sides that we circle in pink. All right, so there's some solving areas, plugging them into the correct formula. Let's go ahead and look at a couple where they give us word problems and we're trying to work backwards or plug it in according to what they give us. So here we go. Ooh, you'll notice right away this starts off with the area of a rectangle is. So they're already telling us that. I'm going to go ahead and make some notes here. They said rectangle, so I know in this problem I'm using B times H. And that very first sentence, they told me that A in this question equals 80. The second piece they tell me is that there's a base that is 16. So I know one of my bases is 16. I don't know the height. They want us to find what is H. Well, let's take our numbers and go plug it into the correct spots. So A is 80, B is 16. We don't know H, so let's copy it, and now we have an equation to solve. All right, if I divide by 16, I get a height of 5 inches. Now, let's think about this. It wants us to find the perimeter next. Well, if I give myself a little picture now, if we know that the height is 5 and the base was 16, we can now copy the 16 here and the 5 here and go back and add up all sides. If I go back, add up all sides, it tells me that the perimeter will give us 42 inches. Again, to get that green answer, we're adding up the 4 numbers. All right, let's go ahead and look at another example. Let's switch to a new color. The area of a square is 64. So I'm thinking area of a square, so I'm thinking side squared. So far, I know that they told me that capital A is 64. It wants us to find the length of each side first. Well, if A is 64 and I need to find one of the sides, I need to solve 64 equals S squared. If I square root both pieces, it tells me that S is equal to 8. Well, the next part of this question says, what is the perimeter? So now let's think of this in a picture. If I had a square and every side was 8, then I need to add up all 4 sides to find out what the perimeter equals. Well, 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, or in this case 8 times 4, we get 32 inches. All right, let's keep going. Notice, here we go again, the area of a parallelogram is 112. So again, let's identify our formula. Parallelogram area is base times height. So far, they've told us that capital A is 112. Next part of this question says the height is 14. So I know H is 14. It wants me to find what is the length of the base. Well, let's plug in our numbers and get ready to solve. Area was 112. The height was 14. We don't know B. Let's solve it. Divide by 14 on both sides, and it tells us that the base would be equal to 8 millimeters. All right, let's go ahead and do one more working backwards, and then we'll go ahead and get ready to get into some practice with this. All right, here we go. The area of a trapezoid is 40. Again, they already told us the area. Let's go ahead and list what our area formula of a trapezoid is. Formula says B1 plus B2 in parentheses times H, all divided by 2. So far, it told us that capital A is 40. Next, it tells us the height is 4, so we know H is 4. It also tells us that B1 is 12, so we know B1. It wants us to find B2. So we're going to go to our formula and we're going to plug in the pieces. A is 40. B1 is 12 plus, I don't know B2, so I'll just call it B2. And then our height was 4, and that's all divided by 2. We're going to go ahead and solve this first. Let's multiply both sides by 2 to get that fraction out of there. I'm left with 80 equals parenthesis 12 plus B2 times 4. Well, I want to move that 4 right now, and if we're timesing by 4, I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4, and those will cancel. I'm left with 20 equals 12 plus B2. Well then, last step to solve will be to move that 12 over, and that will tell me that B2 is equal to 8. And my guess was inches, so 8 inches was B2. All right, so you'll notice when we work backwards, actually you'll notice for every problem, I like to write my formula next to it so that I know what I'm using. All right, if they tell me the area, I know I'm working backwards. If they say find the area, I know I'm plugging it in. All right, we'll get into some practice now. That's 9.2, area of quadrilaterals, area of four sides.